Hi, this is Joe Feeks, editor of Pig Health Today, and with me is Dr. Joe Connor. He is a veterinarian at the Carthage Veterinary Service in Carthage, Illinois. Welcome back to Pig Health Today.
Yeah, thanks, Joe, for the invitation.
You bet. I want to talk with you about a presentation that you gave at the Carthage Veterinary Conference, and you had a presentation called Innovation Look Forward. Now, the pork industry has a long history of innovation, but you kind of came forward with a lot of interesting ideas, some of which could be implemented now, some of which might be a little futuristic. What technology excites you the most?
Well, Joe, I started off by actually showing a slide of a facility being built in China now. And I think we all recognize that crisis does lead to innovation in many cases. But that particular facility is 105,000 sow, farrow to finish, all in one complex, including a feed mill all the way through to a slaughter plant. Feed is delivered about 4 miles from the mill itself and then brought into the complex itself. There's no trucks inside the complex. Pigs move on conveyors, etc. I'm not sure we'll go that far, but I think it does highlight that innovation influences are going to come from our global industry now today.
So as producers look at upgrading their facilities over the next 5 years, what kind of changes should they be looking at?
One is just what I call the practical day-to-day collection of information. So temperature, humidity, pit levels, gas usage, water usage, those that then would be overlaid with growth performance or mortality, morbidity, that does two things. One, helps manage the cost, helps expand our service people over more facilities, but more importantly, lets us make decisions at the pig level in more real time than what we can do today. The other area that is moving forward quite rapidly is in technology that would allow us to assess health more accurately and also remotely. So one of the things that we're looking at and we have put in a barn would be the sound talks, which we know can detect low-level respiratory coughs, and we can actually use that to differentiate even the type of pathogen that might be circulating in that population. Interestingly, what I think most of us has found is we frequently will pick up on that information before the caregiver itself is alerted that it's really a problem. Now, part of that might be because we're ingrained to, as a caregiver, to reach a certain threshold. This technology is picking up cough indexes or cough intensity at a much lower threshold. Ultimately, that would allow us to intervene our therapies or management decisions much more early in the course of the disease.
When you look forward and look at some of the technology that's on the board right now, what do we have coming in terms of biosecurity?
Well, that's an interesting area, and a decision needs to be made how far we go. As an example, some of our clients have looked at tracking individual people, which then is tied to what their tasks are. So two different examples. One is when we do that, we frequently find that we're moving more pigs within the farrowing room than what we thought before. Might be against our SOP, but it might be a normal procedure that they just fall into. The other example would be is walking the pins every day. So again, if we track people, we can, their habits, we can tell that, how much time's being spent in those pins. So I think we've got an area that we can collect information and use that to drive better outcomes.
During your presentation, you talked about syringes that could actually collect data. Could you talk about that a little more?
We've seen over the last 3 years that syringes can collect data, and they're now getting to the point where they are able to do that very efficiently and put that within a data capture database. And if we think about our disease surveillance today, there are a number of examples of population medicine where getting the high population of the pigs vaccinated with the correct dose at the correct age is very important. With syringes that are becoming available, we can capture that type of information. So they tell us if the pig's been full dosed, and if it's not been full dosed, it tells the administrator right then that the pig has not been full dosed. A good example of that would be for PCV2 vaccine, possibly only an 80% dose for one reason or another might not be a high enough threshold to protect that pig. Secondly, the ability to allow that administration data to follow that pig all the way through to the closeout now starts adding some very interesting linkages for us. So if we look at a health challenge within the finishing barn, it's very helpful to know these pigs were vaccinated with this vaccine on this day. They were actually approximately this age. They were all full dosed, because we've got a timestamp and a syringe that is recording that.
Your presentation also talked about imaging technology. I would think that you as a veterinarian would be particularly excited about that.
Yeah, imaging technology, Joe, is one that companies have pursued for several years, primarily looking at putting the right pig on the truck, on the right weight and the grid for a particular packer that we're selling to. It does look like to me we're on a threshold of one or more companies having a handheld technology that would finally allow us to do that on an ongoing individual pig basis. Then when that's available, then you can also link that to the growing phase of the pig and say, is this pig on the correct growth curve? So now it's another set of data when linked to water consumption, like we talked about, feed consumption, that then starts allowing us to make more real-time decisions and recognitions of changes that we could make that would ultimately improve the outcome of those populations.
So Joe, we've talked a lot about data collection at different phases of production. How would the industry bring all this together and make sense of it?
The key thing also is how does that information then flow into a dashboard that has thresholds that would put alerts out for the people in the chain of information to drive decisions. One of the things we do have to be aware of is that we've seen some is that as we transfer more of that type of data collection and interpretation, I should say, to someone else, sometimes the caregiver relaxes a little bit because they believe that someone else is going to alert them if we see a flag or a threshold that's reached. So back to the human side of it, Joe, we still got to continue to work on linking the caregiver with the information that's being collected and then the interpretation of that information. Those two together are more valuable than either one separately. Using the information that we have, but then get it into predictive models that would give us those early warning signs that then would drive our decisions back to the farm level. And most of the time that's going to take collection of additional diagnostic information or the drivers of that problem that arises. but I think we got the opportunity to more proactively intervene. It is an interesting time where we now look forward to many of the things that we have done on an individual pig basis or an individual barn basis now becoming more predictive and preventive, which then will lead to these earlier decisions and lower cost by improving performance.